everyone, and welcome to this brand new episode of the Jedi Way, in which we'll be spoiler reviewing, episode 1 of season 3 of The Mandalorian. I am the Outlaw John Rocha here on the Jedi Way, joined as always by my better half on the show, Laura Kelly. How are you, Laura?
I'm doing amazing. And yes, I am Laura Kelly. I co-host the Force Toast, a Star Wars Happy Hour, and I co-host this show right here, The Jedi Way. We're back. It's been a while, and I'm excited to be back.
Me too. Yeah, we're definitely going to be doing these regularly every week, doing our own reviews of The Mandalorian together, and probably squeeze some Bad Batch stuff in as well as we go along here as we head towards the end of that season. And as we walk into the last month or 5 weeks before we hit Celebration, all the madness of that as well. So strap in. We are going to be doing that weekly here on the Jedi Way. By the way, I was looking at that picture of us. That's like pre-COVID. I feel I look so young and hopeful about the world, and now a little more lived through that. Yeah.
Man, was it pre-COVID? I thought it was like during COVID, because I remember when we started this, I was like, I feel like I wasn't having to commute, and now I have to commute, and I'm just tired all the time.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I'm tired all the time. Well, I mean, a lot of commuting happens in this episode here. We're going to break it all down. The Apostate, first episode of season 3. And again, this is a spoiler review, so if you haven't watched it, go and watch it, and then come on back and hang out with us. Laura, a lot of people have been waiting for this, The Mandalorian here. We've had a couple of TV shows in between the Book of Boba Fett, certainly 3 episodes in the Book of Boba Fett that are essentially Mandalorian, a Mandalorian season or mini season there, or mini series there that gives us a little more background on what happened here with Din Djarin and Grogu, with him picking up the N1 Naboo starfighter and all the things that happened in the battle with Paz Vizsla, the discussions with the armor, and the revelation that he had taken off his helmet. So all of that we kind of have to know before we walk into the season. And there was a little bit of a preface, but not as much as I was hoping for them to start the season here. So basically they're saying you need to go do your homework, in essence. What do you think about that before we dive too deep into the review about how they approached letting you know about everything that happened before season 3 started?
Sure, I was really surprised. I mean, I wasn't surprised to see a recap. We're used to that with Star Wars, especially with this show, but the fact that it was such a small recap, and I don't think there was any content from the Book of Boba Fett at all. So the expectation, you're right, was that you either need to go watch this, or there were some interviews I think that came out where I guess Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are just relying on content creators to give viewers the backup information they need. I'm like, for free? Oh, okay. So that's an interesting choice, but it's a choice nonetheless. But yeah, the fact that, the expectations that you got to keep up with this whole universe, and the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian, it teased the Book of Boba Fett, so I think they laid the groundwork for the expectation there. If people chose not to follow it, or if they dropped out of Book of Boba Fett before the last 3 episodes, to each their own. But I think they kind of circled back to, oh, you took off the armor conversation of you took off your helmet, now you have to go atone. That was pretty much all the recap that you got from the Book of Boba Fett, and from previous seasons, I think. So it was interesting, but I'm kind of all for it. I'm fine with not wasting the time and jumping back in. This episode only had a 36 or so minute runtime. Part of it was that very short recap, and I'm kind of glad that they kept it brief. So I don't know if I have, but it was definitely an interesting choice. I mean, what was your sort of interpretation of it?
Yeah, I was surprised by it, but then as I sat back and thought about it, I'm like, no, this is the deal, And I remember Dan Murrell, when we were doing the Book of Boba Fett reviews for the Hollywood Critics Association YouTube recap show, we spoke about it, and it felt to me like Disney is basically saying across all their stuff, by the way, Marvel included, like, if you're not going to watch this stuff, you are going to be left out. We are not going to cater to you to help you catch up. You've got to do the work. And they're essentially telling the audience, you've got to put in the time. You've got to do the work. You've got to watch the stuff. if there's supplemental material to read. They haven't quite gotten to that point yet, even though if you have read the supplemental material, you'll have more depth or some allusions to things that are in the material that'll be cool for you, for those of you who've gone bone deep on the Star Wars or Marvel stuff. But they're essentially saying you've got to catch up and do the work. So I found that to be an interesting choice, but not a surprising one, because it's certainly, they don't want to make it easier for you to skip their stuff. They want you to give them the numbers and give them the view hours and the attention to the stuff that they're doing. But I think you make an excellent point about them relying on YouTube creators to kind of fill in the gaps and fill in the holes here for people who maybe didn't want to watch Book of Boba Fett. So in a way, there you can get the information from multiple avenues, and it's up to you to decide how you want to get that information, or if you want to get that information. And I think they know it's the older people who are like, I don't have time, do you watch all this stuff? It's the younger people who do have time or make the time, who are hardcore Star Wars fans, because they want to catch up with everything. They want to be up to date with everything. And they are the future of fandom in Star Wars. So I think they understand the business plan and how to make it work. But for us, for the older people, I think it's kind of like, hey, do the work or you're going to be left behind. That's kind of how it is now. So yeah. So, but what do you want to talk about the time jump thing here first, or do you want to save that for later on in the review as we talk about it, or maybe afterwards?
Let's talk about it now and just get it over with, because I truly don't know how much I have to say on it. So I'm curious to kind of get your take. I mean, I gave my take yesterday on Twitter, which was what? Question mark. So, and I think I got my answer, which was that it's unclear. I mean, it's just unclear whether or not we're talking about a 2-year time jump in universe, or we're talking about the 2-year time jump between when season 2 ended and when season 3 began, like in our real life. It was 2 years, which it's hard to believe it was that long. I think it kind of went by fast, honestly. I'm surprised. We had lots of content in between, which I appreciate. But the idea that Grogu would have trained with Luke for 2 years, if that's what they're saying, and again, not clear if it is, because I see some people are dead set on one or the other. They're like, no, look at this interview. This is what they said. It's still not clear to me. I've listened to it. I've read it. I'm still not totally sure what to believe. Until they come out and clarify, I'm not sure what to believe. So what's your take here? Yeah,
it's interesting, and let's give the background for some of you maybe catching up on this. This was Dave Filoni, Rick Famuyiwa, and KATEE SACKHOFF were on the Sky Talkers podcast. Shout out to the fine folks at Star Wars Holocron. And Favreau was asked about this time between Book of Boba Fett and season 3 of Mandalorian, what's gone on here. And this is what he said. Grogu is definitely somebody who has spent time in both worlds. This was about 7 minutes and 38 seconds into that particular episode. And he was saying that Grogu spent, quote, many years with the Mandalorian before leaving with Luke Skywalker at the end of season 2. Moreover, he said right after that 2 years passed between the rescue and the events of the Book of Boba Fett chapters 6 and 7. So here's exactly what he said. Grogu is definitely somebody who has spent time in both worlds. We know that he started off earlier in the Jedi Temple. We've seen flashbacks that speak to that. And then we know that he's been rescued and spent many years with the Mandalorian, went back with Luke. Now we've been 2 years apart from him there training. What's interesting is that as he chooses to return to his friend, the Mandalorian, because he's developed an attachment, it's interesting how that echoes in a way Luke's path when he was drawn to the attachment to his friends, and how that helped shape his future. So shape the future. So it's a fascinating kind of time. And look, Star Wars hasn't always been great about time jumps and
no, they haven't.
Right, and canon and all this kind of stuff. And logically, because so many multiple creators are doing their stuff. Yes, did you have George Lucas initially? Sure, but then as things have gone under Disney, it's kind of been haphazard at times to some of the time jumping on all of this stuff, plus what's canon, what isn't canon, what's extended, what isn't, all this kind of stuff. But I thought Star Wars Newsnet did a nice job here of breaking it down, saying that it's a little troublesome, because if you accept just on the surface what Favreau said, it would spell trouble for at least 3 different major characters. It means Luke Skywalker would have been a worse Jedi master than we all thought. Well, considering we have Ben Solo, maybe not. Ahsoka sat on the Thrawn information that she acquired in the Jedi episode from season 2 for way too long, and that Boba Fett and Fennec Shand spent 2 years doing nothing of relevance and didn't take Jabba's palace away from Bib Fortuna until well after recovering the fire spray. And they go on to say, if we try to think there are several months of nothing between Boba and Fennec deciding they need Din's help in the Mandalorian returning to Tatooine. That would make the Pikes extremely slow in their attempted conquest of Tatooine. So it's just kind of confounding, this time stuff they've thrown out here, Laura.
It is, and it's like, I feel like it just would have been easy enough at some point along the line if there was a
Yeah.
plan. If there wasn't a plan, then it wouldn't have been easy. You'd have to go back in time, and that's not easy. But if there had been this plan in place, and it sometimes kind of feels like that's what they're implying, to just drop a line every now and then of like Greef Karga being like, "Oh, Amanda, what's it been? Like a year?" Or like, what if there was a way where they could put words on the screen that say what time? What if they did that? Like, what can you imagine? Oh, wait, they did do it in Andor, and it was really helpful. And it would be really nice if they would have done that maybe somewhere along the line here, so we could all be on the same page. And we would not be questioning these things. And Star Wars News Net wouldn't have had to write that whole article questioning why all of that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I know it was confounding for me because, you know, I'm not always lining up everything time-wise as perfectly as other people are who are very dedicated to making sure everything fits time. So when I read this thing, I say to myself, I'm like, what? Okay, so all of this stuff, how much times? But then, I mean, then Luke, there wasn't really much. There was a connection, but there wasn't much training. Like, I'm just so confused by it all. So I agree with you. I hope Jon Favreau or Filoni comes out and just kind of clarifies everything. And yes, you make an excellent point. They could have absolutely weaved that in to either the intro or done something there in the dialogue, in the scenes to explain. You know, I just finished watching Squid Game, which I'd never seen before, and there is something that and they let you know exactly how much time has gone on since a certain thing, so you can catch up, you can be on the same page. And so it just feels like we're a little haphazard. So it surprises me that there's not a nerd person in the staff here who was like, wait a minute, guys, we need to map this shit out on a wall somewhere, on a chalkboard or whatever, on a whatever board they use, so that we can all be on the same page. And I think it's always essential to have some nerdy person on the staff who is, of course, not super duper nerd and you're unable to speak to them, but like nerdy where they're like, no, we have to kind of make this all make sense. So it's just surprising that they didn't do that, because I know they're all super uber nerds. So why wasn't someone there to kind of lay this out, you know? So it's just a little surprising.
And, you know, I kind of have constant timeline confusion with Star Wars. It's always been sort of aggravating to me, especially in the books, where it seems like it would be a very obvious place to put very easily, where are we in the timeline? And they often don't. And that's fine. But, you know, I'm much more laid back about it now than I was when I was an active trivia competitor needing to really know this stuff.
Right.
I don't like, it's less annoying to me now. And at the end of the day, is it going to affect anybody's enjoyment of this season? If people who weren't part of this discourse that was happening yesterday never knew anything about it, it's not going to affect their enjoyment of the show. It's not going to affect my enjoyment of the show. So I think I'm just going to let it go. But it certainly made for some entertaining back and forth yesterday on Twitter.
That's for sure. I'm sure. And I'm sure John and Dave saw that and we're like, okay, we need to figure this out. And Rick as well. We need to figure this out. But I hear you. I mean, if the Schmodown was still going on, I think a lot of competitors would be banging their heads through walls trying to figure that whole thing out. But anyway, all right, let's jump into it. The Apostate, you know, this is a fascinating title here, Laura, for the first episode, because apostate means a person who renounces a religious or political belief or principle. So this is fascinating, considering what we're getting here right off the bat is Din Djarin is wanting to cleanse himself so he can be accepted back into the clan by the armor and by the rest of the clan here, after having fought Paz Vizsla and retained the Darksaber, after revealing he had taken his helmet off in those Book of Boba Fett episodes. This is now a redemption quest, yet the name of the first episode here is someone who rejects a religious, political belief or principle. So it's just a fascinating title for this episode. Let's talk your overall thoughts here, Laura. We had a lot here with the Mandalorians. We had a lot here on Nevarro, a changed Nevarro, and then we have Bo Katan, a queen without a kingdom, sitting there brooding about the loss of everything that she's encountered here, and then gives him the guide of where to go on Mandalore to be bathed in the waters of the mines there. What'd you think of this episode?
I loved it overall, and I've
Okay.
seen some criticism that it wasn't quite as like explosive as the beginnings of season 1 and season 2, which is a
Right.
fair critique, I think. I didn't care. I have missed this show so much, and I have been just dying to be excited again about
Yeah.
Star Wars because, as you know, Andor wasn't necessarily for me. I like the Bad Batch. It's not
Yes.
blowing me out of the water by any means. So
Right.
I'm just really, really excited to be really excited again in general. I loved how much content we got of Bo Katan in, I think, one of the early trailers. I think, and then another trailer we didn't get any Bo Katan, which is
Mm,
surprising. And now we have her on the cover of Empire magazine with Pedro Pascal. So
right.
I'm not sure what to think about how involved she's going to be in this season. I hope it's a lot because I love this character so much. I'm
Yeah.
so glad that we've got the live action actress playing the character that she voiced. It's just such a cool thing on its surface that is even happening, and the
Yeah.
fact that she's just knocking out of the park as well as she is with just that posture, the way she's sitting in that chair. I'm just like, my God, like what a queen! Like truly, what did you say? A queen without a kingdom? That's
Queen Without a
100%
Kingdom.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm 100% for as much Bo-Katan as we could possibly get in this season, and here's hoping that it's a lot. But it's the when it comes to Din's road to redemption, it's
Yeah.
so interesting because redemption is such a we talk about redemption a lot in Star Wars.
Oh, true.
It's one of those overarching themes over a
Yeah.
lot of our stories for a lot of our characters. And it's a different story with Din because we know, you and I know, the audience,
Yeah.
so he doesn't have anything he needs to be redeemed for. It's just
Right.
in his head with this cult in the way that he's been brainwashed that he needs to go and bathe in the waters of Mandalore and blah. It'll take us on a cool side quest. I'm excited to actually see what is beneath that. I think we got a hint of that in the trailer,
Mhm.
possibly. So I'm excited to get a little bit more close up. Um, but I really like this new role he's sort of taking on with Grogu. We've been in a different position with Din and
Yeah.
Grogu before, where the mission has been we got to offload him and get him back to his people. And now Din's mission, and he seems to be taking it seriously, is to now raise him
Mhm.
as in the Mandalorian creed and teach him how to survive in this galaxy. And I really love that shift in story structure and how that's going to hopefully play out over the course of this season, and how all of bathing in the waters of Mandalore and getting redeemed plays into that. I don't know. I thought we were on a different road with Din where we were going to sort of get away from this cult stuff,
Mm.
but that is clearly not happening yet. So, do
Yeah.
you think that we're on that way? They'll sort of circle back to that at some point. Am I misremembering the Book of Boba Fett and some of those later things in season 2? What are your thoughts?
No, I think he was just I think he's this whole journey he's been on has rattled him, right? And I think
Yeah.
this is where he's trying to put all the pieces back together. So the foundational piece of who he is his membership in this clan or cult, depending on your perspective. And for him to have that threatened, it is the foundational piece of his existence. So even though he's questioning things, even though he's seen more, even though he's gone on this journey of kind of accepting droids again from the trauma that he experienced, even though Grogu has opened him up and softened him up and put down his walls a little bit, awoken this piece of him, this patriarch or paternal piece of him that maybe he didn't know he had. Even though all of this stuff is changing, even Greef Karga changing, so who had been like his not boss but supplier of jobs for him to make
Yeah.
money and do the stuff. So much is changing in his life that if you were to if you were to erode or destroy or shatter the foundational piece of his belief, I think that would be too much for him to take. So for right now, what he's going to do is to go in there and bathe himself in the waters or in the mines of Mandalore because he desperately wants to reestablish his connections so he has some foundation to stand on from which to process all the things that are happening. So I think that's what you're getting with Din Djarin. It is certainly he's going for redemption to the clan or cult that he is in because he wants to be accepted again. At least I have this, if nothing else, this is stable. But I think in the end, by the end of the season, he is going to find that that is a much more strict and closed off approach to the world. And Mike was saying this in our Geek Buddies review. Michael Vogel, he was talking about this clan may be an offshoot of the Death Watch clan, which was formed to battle against this idea that the Mandalore should be pacifists rather than warriors. So it may be that he finds that this is not the clan for him anymore, and I think that's where you're going to see the breakout. And just from the opening scene here, and we'll get your thoughts on that too, Laura. The ritual that is happening here. We see the armor knocking out the creating the helmet of the Beskar armor there, but we also see this massive alligator-like creature that's something out of the dinosaur ages roll up in there and start to eat some of the Mandalorians, rolling around. They're trying to fight this thing up, putting chargers, flying up there, shooting, and they can't destroy this thing until Din Djarin shows up with that Naboo starfighter, that N1, and blows the thing up in a brutal and gory fashion. And to me, there's a lot of symbolism there. There's this thing that destroys, this big thing that destroys their ritual. Here is Din showing up to destroy that thing that's destroying their ritual. Does that mean he's going to go back, or is that a symbolism of him when he breaks out from this clan? Is that the thing that's going to destroy this clan or shatter this clan? I don't know, but it's a fascinating beginning and a fascinating title for supposedly a redemption journey, when in fact it may be a rejection journey by the end of the season. What did you think about this whole opening here with the Mandalorians and with that alligator creature, and then the conversation that the armorer has with Din, talking about the glassing that went on to Mandalore, talking about how he still needs to redeem himself, and that he has to convince the armorer to let him go redeem himself, and then he takes off to try and do so. So what did you think about this whole opening sequence here in this episode?
Well, first of all, I kind of thought that this whole bit with this monster, it's my one of my sort of two critiques of this episode is that this bit went on a little bit too long for me. I didn't necessarily need, and I've complained that I want longer episodes of the show, but this whole portion of this episode it dragged a little bit for me. And now, granted, I have watched this episode now 3 times today.
Wow.
So that could possibly be why. But yeah, the ritual itself was interesting. I think the more I watched, the closer I got to looking at some of these other Mandalorians that are in this scene.
Oh, yeah.
Number one, I didn't see any younger children without helmets. So this kid must be the sort of last of the young ones in this group. Number two, the helmet he's wearing is sort of similar in coloring to what Paz Vizsla has on. So I wonder if it's supposed to be like some sort of relation to Paz Vizsla's son, but like the fact that we have that lineage potentially continuing is just interesting on its surface, given what we know about Clan Vizsla. And another interesting, I think, part of this is at the end of the day, this kid did not complete that creed.
Oh, good point.
So I wonder sort of where that's going to lead, or if it's just sort of supposed to be our kind of our symbolism overall of what's to come. But I think my first sort of thought with Din saving all of them was that this is sort of Din's first step of trying to redeem himself in the eyes of this clan/cult. But the more I think about it, I'm like, well, he's a good guy. He would do the right thing no matter what. Even if that wasn't his group of people, I'd like to think he'd probably swoop in and save the day if he saw them struggling in that way.
True.
So maybe it's not related. I don't know. But the conversation that they have about, the glassing of Mandalore immediately took me back to Boba Fett's in season 2 of The Mandalorian telling the group, have you got to be kidding me? Mandalore, the Empire turned that planet to glass. And all of us were like, what does that mean? That is like, those are words. What do they all mean though? That's strange. Does it mean, is that a symbolism and now we know they literally did turn the planet to glass with these crystallized shards that Din somehow came up with. And I also like that we don't know anything about that adventure. We don't know how that exchange came to be with the Jawas and how he came to be in possession of that. And I kind of like that. It gives us a little bit of mystery with Din. But, she says like that proves the whole of Mandalore's surface has been crystallized by fusion rays. There are no waters for you to go redeem yourself in. So I don't know. But the fact that she kind of has that little exchange with Grogu is also really cute, where she looks down at him, and the way she moves her head is so subtle and so slow, and Grogu's ears just, like, tilt down, like he is also intimidated by this woman.
Yeah.
It's just a fantastic exchange. So I enjoyed the conversation overall, and I liked getting to know what that circling back to that, what does glassing mean as a
Yeah.
verb? Now we know, and I'm glad that we sort of got some of that background in this situation. What stood out to you in this portion, in this beginning scene?
Well, it struck me that as I watched it again this afternoon before we did our review, it struck me again that this feels like her and Paz have an idea of what they want to do with this clan, and
Okay.
that Din is starting to slowly move away from this clan, and they may want him to move away from this clan. No, him and Paz had that massive fight there. The armor just kind of
Yeah.
let it happen in Book of Boba Fett. And now here we are back again. They're all there. You see the Vizsla banner there as well, which indicates that there is an influence there of this old clan that was a huge part of Mandalorian culture. I just feel like they're setting Din up, or they're framing Din, because the fact that she even said, "Oh, there's no waters on Mandalore because it's all crystallized." Like, she seems to be someone who would know more than that, who would be more aware of it than you think. So is she telling truth? Is she not telling the truth? And so there's a kind of distance and aloofness, which is cool. And when we're watching it, we enjoy it. But if you're actually Din Djarin, she's not letting him kind of come closer or kind of be redeemed in a way by just conversation. He has to go and perform these acts. And she even tells him not to do it. Like, there's no way to do it. There's no waters. You're done. Right? Thanks for blowing up the alligator dinosaur or whatever, but you still can't come back into the clan. So to me, it feels like Paz and the armor have an idea of what they want to do with this clan, and that Din Djarin is becoming surplus to needs. And I think they're going to turn on him at some point. And that's what I feel. I feel like they're going to mess with him or turn on him at some point, as a clan or as a cult would do once you start to question the leader's philosophy, the leader's points of views. They immediately vilify you, call you a suppressive person or whatever term you want to use, and try to railroad you out of the clan or the cult. As we've seen in numerous cult documentaries, if you watch those over the years, we've seen that happen. And I feel like eventually they're going to screw him over. I think the armor is just letting it all play out. Whereas I'm sure Paz would be like, let's just stab this dude in the back already. I feel like the armor wants to kind of let this play out a little bit. That's what I think. Now, I know that they were by his side in season 1 and they've fought with him. I can see already people scribbling ready to type their comments out, but I'm just saying things change. And it feels like as he's evolving out of this clan, they are more than willing to shove him out of this clan as well, because they don't need him bringing that energy in here. So I'm just very fascinated by it all for on my end. So, am I off base? Am I crazy? Do you think?
No, and I think him having the dark saber is not helping in that situation.
Yes.
We already saw that battle royale go down between him and Paz in the book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
They are not happy that he has retained that thing, I don't think. And I think that's definitely working against him.
Because the symbolism, right, of what that thing is, we'll get to when we talked about Bo Katan, the symbolism of that dark saber for the Mandalorians, what that means, right? And someone as simple as Din, who is just a bounty hunter, who isn't connected to the clan Vizsla and doesn't have all this, history on Mandalore, for him to be the one that holds the dark saber, there must be some feeling of anger in that. It's kind of like with the King Arthur story. He was just some page who pulled the sword out, and people didn't realize who he actually was. So there could be something here down the road where we get a little more about who Din Djarin actually is and how his heritage has been hidden away from even him, and what will happen once he discovers it. So just a lot of questions for sure. Let's take a quick break here, Laura, and then we'll jump into some more of the Mandalorian. Oh, I don't have a thing. You know what? I'll just we'll do something sweet. We'll let you take a look at this guy.
There he is.
All right, let's jump
all his glory.
I mean, he's just such a good-looking dude. Let's jump into the second section here of the show. Everything on Nevarro here is very fascinating, Laura. I mean, we have Greef Karga, who is making it clear that you understand that he is the High Magistrate, wearing the incredible robes. I got Lando vibes off of him big time with the way he's handling himself. But we get the Mando coming back with Grogu. This is a vibrant Nevarro. We see the monkey lizards hanging out, the Kowakian monkey lizards hanging out in the trees instead of being cooked over pits and cages. We see a statue of IG-11, very noble statue of IG-11. Mando wants to put this droid back together in order to, because he doesn't trust many droids. This is the only droid he really trusts. Wants to put him back together so he can help him when he goes to Mandalore. And when he does put him back together, he tries to kill Grogu. They eventually fight him off. Greef takes him over to hang out with the Anzellans, and they tell him, you can't do anything. We got to get some old memory unit. He's like, okay, I'll go do it myself. Then we're dealing with some space pirates here. We get introduced to a new character, Vane here, but also is this pirate captain we're going to get to. We get Gorian Shard, who gets introduced in this as well. So a lot happens, and then eventually, and we get space whales. We get purrgils when he's heading to Nevarro. So much in this section. What stood out? What do you want to talk about? What do you feel about this section of the show here?
Well, the space whales came first, so I'm on our way to Nevarro. So I'm going to circle back to that because I also just am dying to talk about it. Grogu watching the swirl of hyperspace while I'm assuming Din Djarin is sleeping.
It seems like he's sleeping. Yeah.
It seems like he's sleeping. And then he crawls into his little arms at the end. That whole scene alone could have been, you could have done just that, and I would have been happy as a clam because it was cool looking and it was absolutely adorable. But then they added purrgil, and I just exploded in my room. I cannot even put into words how excited I was to see this, watching it at 6 a.m, trying to contain myself at seeing live action purrgil. One funny fact, the audio description, I sometimes watch it with the audio description on, and one of my watch throughs of this episode, they referred to the purrgil as mysterious celestial entities, which I like. They don't actually name them, which is interesting, but we all know, all of us Rebels fans know that these are purrgil, and this is a callback to Star Wars Rebels. So if you're not up to date on watching all of the animated series, this is one that's worth looking up because this is a major event. This leads to a major event in Star Wars Rebels, which is the disappearance of Thrawn and Ezra Bridger,
right?
Which seems to be what we're gonna be leading to eventually. But in addition to just the appearance of purrgil, we have the chorus sort of come into the score, and the music swells in this scene, and we just linger on this wide shot of this screen, and I just love these quiet moments when we're allowed to just stretch them out a little bit. Star Wars is so good at picking just the perfect moments to do that. And this was one of them. And I'm glad we got to just linger on this wide shot of the itty bitty tiny little N1 against the backdrop of the gigantic purrgil in the back. Like, just beautiful. This is the kind of stuff in Star Wars that just means the world to me as a fan and as a Star Wars Rebels girly. Like, I was in heaven this morning. So now I'm back down here and I get to talk about it. And this is just like a different part of heaven, and I love it. So what was your, before we dive into the rest of it, did you have any reaction to the purrgil on any kind of level that I'm on?
Yeah. Well, initially I was like, why are they spending so much time in the hyperspace thing? I get it. But just Grogu just kind of looking around and everything. So I was like, okay, maybe they're just focusing on the fact that this is all still really cool to him. And so he's just kind of taking it all in, which, when all kinds of stuff is falling apart in Star Wars, you forget that there is some beauty in Star Wars. So having that scene where he's initially just kind of, looking at everything blown away. And then I'm like, why are they focusing? And then all of a sudden I saw the shadow and I was like, you got to be kidding me. And I thought for sure, like something was going to happen and we were going to see it. And then the fact that we didn't, I think, was even better. So just a hint of it that got me excited for sure. I was like, oh, this is great. This is genius. And certainly, they spent money on this season because showing those special effects, doing those cinematic approaches to these episodes, especially in this episode, really, it kind of shows you that they understand where their money I don't know where their cash I'm gonna say this, where their money maker is, where their money, and that is the Mandalorian. So why not spend the extra money there? And certainly seeing the silhouette, seeing the legs there in the back, just kind of floating there, I was like, oh, this is great. This is so genius. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and the thing is, I also said, this is why Star Wars is so great now, because they now have a rich trove of stuff to reference from multiple areas, from Rebels to the prequel trilogy to the sequel trilogy to the old school trilogy to Clone Wars. There's so much they can reference, and some of the book stuff as well. There's so much they can reference here and have fun with, and in delight all fans of different sections of the Star Wars universe. So that purrgil being there, I was like, that they totally wanted to give a nod to the Rebels fans, but also lay the groundwork a little bit, knowing that the
Yes.
Ahsoka series is coming, and that's going to be focusing on Thrawn and Ezra Bridger and how much the space whales are connected to that. So just letting you know that that's already the next thing that you need to be focusing on once you're done with this show. So very smart stuff by them overall.
100%. I agree that they're leading into it. They're trying to lead us to it, and also,
Mm,
but also giving us this moment that feels so well earned
yeah,
as fans
100%.
who have partaken in Star Wars Rebels. So it's just fantastic. But circling back to the IG-11 stuff that you brought up,
Yeah, yeah,
I first of all, I love this statue that he's number one, that they've reconstructed part of him at all after he self-destructed
yeah,
at the end of
right?
season one, and that he's standing atop a pile of stormtrooper helmets. That is a really nice touch. We may have seen that in the trailer and I'm just not remembering it, but that was really, really nice. And you're
Agreed.
totally right. I mean, Greef Karga coming in here with the Lando vibes. He's got the confidence, he's got the swagger, and
Yeah.
he's got a cape. And not only does he have a cape, he has two droids carrying the train of
Mm.
the cape. And I just love that. That, what a silly thing. And it's so cool though. And it's so bright red. I mean, like, I think one of Greef Karga's colors, I think early on in seasons 1 and 2 were like this sort of deep maroon color. The
Yeah,
fact that we are going like balls to the wall, bright lipstick red now. He's
yeah.
all about it. Now we've got our high magistrate. And I'm here for that. I'm happy for him. I also love that, like, I think I made a joke at one point, like last season probably, that like, oh, we've gentrified Nevarro, like they have a farmer's market, whatever. But like, I like to think that Greef Karga is like, he's not displacing people.
No.
This isn't gentrification. He seems to like, he's got really the best interests of Nevarro at heart. Truly. I mean, he's offering up Din a piece of land to just go retire on, hang out with this little boy. Like, I would love that for them. I have no anticipation that that is how their story is going to end, but
No.
imagine a cute little alternative universe where that happens.
Right, him getting old, getting the little beard coming out, the gray beard coming out from underneath the helmet. Yeah, I
Aw.
mean, all of that stuff. Yeah, I mean, but I will say this, and I enjoyed the stuff on Navarro. It was nice to see the set designs of all of this stuff, and certainly the costume design that Greef Karga is wearing. I mean, it's incredible. Carl Weathers for so long was kind of that person you knew from the Rocky films, right, or from Action
Happy
Jackson,
Gilmore.
or what's that? Happy
Happy
Gilmore, yes,
Gilmore.
Happy Gilmore, or Predator. Those are decades ago, which is of course hard for some people to hear, but those were decades ago. So to have him kind of have a new life here as an older actor, especially as an older black actor, which isn't, there aren't always a lot of roles for older black actors. It's great to see him embracing this. And Greef Karga is an interesting character because he's always been kind of thinking he's a little more above than the situation that he's in. So having him become a high magistrate and stressing the high magistrate, even to his own droids, I think is an essential element of his character. He wants to be seen as something more. And when the pirates show up and they start to remind him, because he's put a school in where the bar is, when they start to, you had us commit all kinds of murder and treachery and mayhem right in that bar. You assigned us jobs right in that bar. So for you to kind of be judging us or be saying you won't have a drink with us here in this bar, that's kind of a mistake. So just like most politicians, they want to hide that past stuff and just focus on them wanting to do more. But I will say this, Laura, something to consider with Greef Karga. Just like Lando, there is a possibility down the road that it's going to be either Din Djarin or Nevarro, and which will he choose? Just like Lando sold out Han and Leia and
Ooh.
Luke, will Greef do that with Mando down the road and Grogu? I don't know, because he did offer him the land, but he also said, I need a marshal
Yeah.
because Cara Dune is out with special forces, and Moff Gideon is in front of a tribunal here, the New Republic tribunal. But he doesn't want to work with the New Republic either. He kind of wants to keep, so it's a very clear thing that Greef wants to create a fiefdom, but he wants to kind of help everybody in Nevarro. but he wants to be the end all be all of Nevarro. And I think that could be dangerous down the road for someone like Greef, so it's a fascinating twists and turns they've taken with his character in this whole sequence here on Nevarro.
Exactly. We've talked a lot about this sort of line of thinking, I think, with Sid and the Bad Batch too. Of like,
yeah.
yes, Sid is the one assigning the mission, but Sid has some ulterior motives. We know that about her, and we know we've sort of come to know what to expect with her. And I think there will still be that lingering question of, does Greef Karga have ulterior motives here, besides the fact that he doesn't want to have to be the enforcer in town, and he wants Din Djarin to be the person that comes in as marshal and acts in that. Is there more to it than that? Time will tell. But I like to think that he's got, you're right. I like to think that he's got the good intentions, especially when it comes to the fact that, he doesn't want to bring in some distant bureaucrat that doesn't actually live on the planet to help run the planet. He wants it all to stay grounded and stay local and make sure that the planet thrives in the way that he wants it to thrive. And I kind of hope for the best for him. I think it's cool that he's still walking around with that blaster underneath all those robes too, and we still got to see that standoff and that duel play out the way that it did. I was like, oh yeah, he's still got it. It's perfect.
It's a great Western moment. What'd you think of the whole Anzellans sequence? I think that's Shirley Henderson back, Moaning Myrtle back to voice him. So what'd you think of that whole sequence when Greef is the one bringing Din there, and then Din sitting cross-legged inside that little, I don't even know how he got in there, but inside
I don't either.
having the conversation, and we see Grogu grab one of them, and I don't know if he's just hugging or if he's going to eat him. I don't know, because we see him eat frogs and stuff with it. I don't know what he's doing in that moment, but it's very cute, the bad baby stuff. But they tell Din, look, you got to get this old memory unit or else you're not going to be able to get this thing back in working order. And Din is like, okay, I'm going to go get the memory unit. It's really interesting. This is how deep his distrust of droids still is, because he's only trusting this droid because it was able to be reprogrammed in a certain way. So he's dedicated to that. He's old school like that, and we all know people like that who are like, no, I have to write things down in a piece of paper. We know people like that. And so it's just interesting to see that. And did you like the comedy here with the Greef and Mando? Greef like conveying what they were saying, even though by that point Mando had already gotten it. What did you think of this whole sequence with the Anzellans?
The humor bit of this is my second nit of this episode. I only have two critiques of this episode, and it was the action sequence at the beginning went too long, and this bit played out too much. I didn't need this much of it. It was one too many for me. Really? With this silly little attempt at humor with the Anzellans. I love that Shirley Henderson is back. She's playing the entire Anzellan crew according to the credits, so that's really fun. But when it comes to fixing IG-11, Din is kind of in a weird in-between space, because you're right. He still is in a space where he's not trusting of droids. I mean, we see that gold protocol droid that Greef Karga has is actually the one who saves him from the zombie IG-11 that's like crawling. That was a total jump scare moment in this episode, by the way. I loved it. Mini
Terminator, Laura.
So scary, but so great. And I love that they threw that in. But yeah, it's actually that other droid that saves him. And I thought for sure he would be like, hey, I need a droid I can trust. How about that one that's standing right there? But no, it's got to be IG-11. So the fact that he's the one that actually tries to make the attempt to fix him himself. I thought that was a great moment of growth for Din Djarin. But, ultimately it has to come down to the Anzellans. I love that we brought them back. I love the Anzellans from Rise of Skywalker. So I was totally here for it. The interaction with them and baby Grogu. You're right. Don't know if he was trying to eat him or just hug him. But the fact that we got that no squeezy line from Shirley Henderson, I was dying. So I really enjoyed that little bit, but I enjoy any little bit that includes Grogu. So he could have just been standing in the background doing nothing, and I still would have been like, I love this. But I really enjoyed that. Again, I don't know how he got in. You're right. How did Din Djarin get into that tiny little crawl space? I don't know. That's the power of the volume and movie magic, I suppose.
That's true. Or Grogu used the Force and got him in there. I don't know. It's
maybe.
He used the Force to get a little snack off of Greef Karga's desk there. So yeah, it's a fascinating situation, but. So clearly, he's going to go off and go get this thing and go get this memory unit. I saw some criticism of this, Laura. I want to stop for a second and see, do you feel the same? I mean, do you think people are trying to see this through their perspective rather than the character's perspective. Because if he's mistrusting of droids, still deeply mistrusting, of course he's going to go and get the memory unit and do it, because to him, this is what I trust. This is what I know. I'm going to go get it. I've been able to accomplish so many missions on these separate journeys. What's another one mission so I can get to these mines of Mandalore in the waters and bathe in them? I will do that. So I saw some people going like, why would he just stick with this? Or why this seems like a stupid thing for him to want to do or a waste of time. And it's like, well, no, this is how he's built as a character. At least I feel like. Do you think the criticism has some validity that I'm missing here?
No, I think you're right in that this is number one, how he's built as a character. Number
Hmm.
two, this is how this show is built. We are familiar with this process. We
You're
know
right.
this routine. We
Yeah.
know the structure. We know that he's going to need to go from place to place and get these side missions because, oh, he needs something, but he needs something before he can get the first something. So he has to go do a side mission, and that's going to be a whole episode.
Right.
This has been the pattern. This shouldn't be new or a surprise to anybody who has watched the first two seasons of this show. And they're also probably just looking for an excuse to bring Taika Waititi in for a little bit of
Oh
voice
yeah.
work, which I'm all for because IG-11 is a great character. So if that's what all of this is leading to, fine.
Yeah.
I'm totally fine with it. But I think I get it. People get tired of the mission of the week thing. We get tired of it with the Bad Batch. I've voiced it there. I'm sure in our Mandalorian reviews, I've voiced it with the Mandalorian.
Yeah.
But I'm not surprised by this, and I'm going into this season fully expecting it to honor the sort of structure of this show that we've built on up until this point. They're going to keep it going for at least a little while before they throw anything really all that out there, I think, into the mix. But I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I think that this seemed par for the course for me. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's not going to be Andor. The show's not going to be Andor. The show
No.
is. I think you made an excellent point here, Laura. The show has always been the show, and that is the show. There's always an overarching storyline, but within the overarching storylines in every episode, there are these missions he has to go on, and this is the show. I think people want to kind of twist the show into something that it isn't, when it's always been a mission of the week type of show. So either accept it or don't, but this is the path they're walking, and you're really banging your head against a wall that's not going to move, being upset about it because it's not going to change. And within the mission of the weeks, I think we're going to get more of the overall storyline of the Mandalorian situation. As you mentioned earlier, and we're going to about to talk about the Bo Katan stuff. What is her role in all of this? What is the path that he is going to have to walk here in between some of these forces? You've got the clan over here with the armor. You've got Bo Katan. You've got Mandalore. What's the real truth of what's going on in Mandalore? We're now figuring out what to do after all the stuff has gone down with the Empire. Okay, what condition is Mandalore in? What's going to happen there? So there's a lot that's going to be presented to us about the overall storyline, which is the Mandalorian stuff and his redemption quest. But I think within the episodes, he's going to have to do little things in order to kind of move to the next step or move to the next level of the game, in essence. Almost every season is a video game. He's got to go level to level to level until he accomplishes the overall goal that he has to do so he can win the game for that season. And I feel like the Mandalorian is certainly diving into that here as he goes after this memory unit and heads off to see Bo Katan now for his next thing, which we should get into. And we'll take a quick break here right after this. Enjoy this, dude.
Kalevala. That is I have it spelled out phonetically in my notes of this.
And that's where we're going. Laura said that's where we're going. Kalevala. Here's where Bo Katan is. And before we get there, though, we see Din encounter some space pirates, and we see an old school asteroid belt fight in the sky, in space, which we've seen, of course, in numerous movies and shows before. And this all leads us to this pirate ship, which is run by Captain Gorian Shard here. And this is actor Nonso Anozie, who some of you may know from Game of Thrones or Sweet Tooth or a number of other British and American shows and films that he's been a part of. Such a great choice to have an actor like this. And Gorian Shard thinks he's got the jump on Din after he shoots at just about everybody out of the sky except for Vane. But then he takes off. I described it like Fast and Furious. He just hit the Nox and he was gone, man. So Gorian Shard, I'm sure we're going to see more of him down the road. But that's about the interaction we have with him. So he gets to Kalevala here, the homeworld of the House Kryze, and heads into Bo Katan's castle, and she is not too happy to see him. They have a back and forth about the Darksaber, about how all her people have left her because she didn't come back with the Darksaber. She's sitting there, as we said, like a queen without a kingdom, giving that DGAF vibe for sure, but also speaks about his beliefs and his idea of Mandalorian, what he's got to do. And she ridicules it, but she also contradicts herself, with which the Mandalorian calls her out on. And then she tells him where these mines of Mandalore are and where these waters are. And she reveals that they lie beneath the Civic Center in the city of Sundari, which was once the capital city of Mandalore, which of course everybody who's a Star Wars fan knows Sundari. And that was featured heavily throughout Clone Wars. And it was destroyed during the Great Purge. So, Laura, what did you think about the interaction scene with Gorian Shard as a new character in Star Wars here? And also, I mean, when you hear Pirate King, I mean, I know Hondo's probably on Batuu somewhere, but still.
Exactly. That was the first thought, was Hondo, but no, it wasn't Hondo. I thought for sure that's what they were teasing to.
Gorian, and of course, what you think about Bo Katan. So please go ahead. Yeah.
Well, Gorian Shard, I don't know if I have too much of an opinion on, but you know that they didn't put all that work into building that character to only show him for a little. So that's definitely coming back. I really liked this dogfight in space. Like, I don't remember seeing a ton of like pirates in starfighters. That didn't strike me something we've seen a lot of. Maybe we haven't. I just am not remembering. But I thought it was cool. It was great to see this play out in live action. It had a lot of like Obi-Wan Kenobi over whatever the planet is in Attack of the Clones, where he's being chased by Boba and by Jango, like where he's having to hide in the asteroids. They like took that and they were just like, what if we like up that like a lot? And I like how it played out in the scene with the pirates. But all of this stuff with Bo Katan, first of all, the conversation to me almost struck me as like there was more to this conversation that got cut out of this episode, because some of the conversation just felt disjointed, and maybe that's what it was. Maybe it was supposed to be that on purpose, because like you said, like she does contradict herself in this conversation. So maybe that was all on purpose. I don't know, but it felt a little bit choppy to me. I mean, there's also a moment where she says that the stolen fleet is making their way through galaxy as mercenaries, and I'm like, ooh, I don't remember what the stolen fleet is. When did she steal a fleet? How did we come across? So I need to maybe go back and I need a refresh on that part of things. But you know, she tells him, Nick, if you still have that saber, then why don't you go lead them? Why don't you just go do it? And you know, wave it around and they'll do whatever you say. And I think what I hope actually is that this means that she now sort of understands how meaningless this relic really is. And maybe she always did, but she was so hell-bent at the end of season 2 of getting that thing back. And I hope that it's just become a little bit more clear that she's like, none of this matters. And it'll be really interesting, I think, when we finally get to see Din Djarin whip it back out, because it's sort of disappointing that we talked about the Darksaber quite a bit in this episode. We never actually got to see it. But she still seems bitter about it, to be honest, for lack of a better term. And girl, I get it. I love a good grudge, and I do not let shit go. So stay toxic, my friend. It's totally fine. But their conversation was just really interesting, and I'll be curious to see how all of this ends up playing out and where she comes back into play. Because again, she's sort of featured heavily in one trailer and not heavily at all in the next. And then in this one, she's got a co-starring credit. KATEE SACKHOFF has a co-starring credit at the end of this episode. So she's a big part of this, and I hope that stays this way. But all of this sort of talk about superstitions and curses, and you know, the fact that we get to finally go back to Sundari, you're right, that was a really, really beautiful area, a really beautiful part of the galaxy, and even part of Mandalore when we saw it in the Clone Wars in animated form. So it'll be really interesting. I think it's going to be really sad to get the close-up of what it looks like now. I think that's just going to take us right back to some of those really sad moments where we saw the effects of the Purge. And it's going to make for some real effective TV. But overall, I hope we get more of her.
Yeah, I think we will. I mean, she's been showing, as I mentioned earlier in the show, she's been showing up on the podcasts. She's been there, as you said, on the cover there with Pedro Pascal. We've seen her she was at the premiere last night and was very much a big part of the premiere last night. And so I think they didn't want to give away how much she's going to be involved this season. but I think they realize, and I think this is why they cast Katie to play the role again in front of the camera in season 2, like move her from behind the mic to in front of the camera, because they had plans for Bo Katan in season 3 that was going to be much more extensive. And Katie's certainly a very experienced actress with Battlestar Galactica and other things. So she's perfect to come and play a heavier part or a larger part in this overall story. And her family and herself is so connected to Mandalore, whereas he's going there to bathe and he's been part of this plan. She is much more a part of he's the alternative Rock, and she is like the full-on pop music main center or mainstream type of thing. And that's the Mandalore, the planet Mandalore. So there's much more to her history and her time. Now, the Vizsla clan is a whole nother thing, so we don't know how that's all going to play itself out into this situation. But Mandalore as a representative thing, it's clear that it's a planet that's been decimated and destroyed by the Empire, kind of like their people are now. Her saying that they're off doing like mercenary missions or whatever, and they all just left her, is a really fascinating thing. Because you look at the situation here with Din and with Katan when they're having the conversation, and Bo is making not fun, but she's not putting any credibility in his beliefs, in the clan's beliefs, in the idea of the waters of Mandalore. I think she says it's all a lie. It's not they're disgusting. It's not a big deal to be in those waters. I think she's putting no credibility in that yet, because for her that means nothing. But for her, the Darksaber, that symbol is something. So in a way, we're having, as we've spoken about in our show, in the Jedi Way, the theology, the philosophies, the things that you're chasing, and what constructs you as a person. These are smashing into each other. And she seems kind of unself-aware of the fact that there's no difference between her and Din. She just believes something different than he believes, but the symbols can be denigrated or devalued just as easily by the other side. So it's just fascinating to see all that. And that may be what you're talking about when she's sitting on that throne in a very, kind of badass, like whatever, looking pretty hot kind of way. It's basically saying like, what was the point of all of this? And Bo has always had this kind of not bitterness, but pettiness, or this feeling of she deserves a little bit. I don't want to say Karen, but maybe Karen light a little bit, but she deserves certain things, And so I like that as a driving impulse with her. I don't like to see her sitting there brooding. I want to see action. Go get it. Go figure it out, And so hopefully Din visiting her is what kind of shakes her out of this lull that she's in and leads her to be a more active participant, not only in Din's story, but in the overall story that they're going to be telling here this season. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. Let me throw something out of you that I was doing a little bit of research here for the show. And Gorian shard is an interesting thing because shards are an actual species in Star Wars. They're native to the planet Orax. And they are these clusters of crystals, which grew among the planet's many hot springs. And these colonies consisted of hundreds of thousands of individual shards, each connected in a group mind via their natural electromagnetic communication abilities. And so they had this kind of almost like what we saw in Last of Us, the fungals, their ability to communicate with each other. So I wonder, because he's green and he looks kind of like a Swamp Thing, if Gorian shard is like that connected to that thing, or if I'm just way out on a limb with this. But I saw that and I was like, well, it's green in the Star Wars wiki and hot springs. He looks like he could be a swamp kind of creature. Is there a possibility this is the shard being introduced here as canon in the Star Wars universe? I don't know.
And is this going to be like a bigger monster, bigger adversary or something? Right. And as we see this all play out in the Mandalore arc, that's a good question. Who knows? If you're out on a limb, it's a fun one. I'm out here with you. I'm enjoying it. So that's an interesting dive, I think.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Yeah. Okay. Any final words on this episode? Anything about the music? Anything about the look of it, the feel of it, the vibe of it, anything that you want to discuss that we didn't bring up here in our review, Laura?
One last thing on Bo Katan, she really is in this such a negative headspace right now. She lost the Darksaber, she lost her followers, her people are scattered. We hear Din Djarin say that in the trailer for season 3. And I wonder how long it's going to take before the two of them realize that they are ultimately aligned. in their goals. If they're both wondering, like, our people are scattered, how do we fix it? Like, they eventually have to come together on that. So I hope that that happens sooner rather than later, because I want to see them team up, because it's incredibly enjoyable. I don't know if I want to get into predictions for this season. I do have one particularly for how this season's going to end.
Okay.
But maybe now's not the place to get into it. But
Okay.
I really do like that director Rick Famuyiwa is going to be bookending this season. He directed this first episode. He's also going to direct episodes 7 and 8, which will presumably be like a 2-part finale. So I'm excited for that, because I really did enjoy this episode. I've always really enjoyed his episodes of this show so far, so pumped for that.
He's an EP on the show now for the first time this season as well. So clearly crafting the story, or influencing the story in a lot of ways by doing the first episode and the last 2 episodes, and also being I'm sure he was in the consulting room there with Favreau and Filoni when looking at the overall arcs on the show. So that's going to be fun to see as well.
Yeah, speaking of credits, one other note is that Lateef Crowder and Brendan Wayne, who have been the doubles for Din Djarin, are finally showing up now in the credits in like a bigger way. The first 2 seasons, they've been listed after the cast as the doubles for The Mandalorian, but they're sort of more front and center towards the beginning of the credits, which I think is really... that's a great way, I think, to appreciate them. So I like that. These are the guys that are bringing this character to life, you guys. I don't know how much Pedro Pascal is actually involved in the on-set stuff. You know, like, only when we see him take off his helmet I assume is when he's actually there. Other than that, he's just doing the voice, which is an accomplishment in itself. But the fact that we really have a lot, I think, to hang on these 2 actors of really bringing, or these 2 stunt guys for bringing this character to life.
Yeah, which again is in the tradition of Star Wars, because David Prowse was the physical embodiment of Vader. It was James Earl Jones doing the voice. So this idea that an actor has to be recognized, for what they're doing in the costume, even though they may not be their voice. Come on, like I don't think that's Emily Swallow in the armor outfit every time. So
I would guess not too. Yeah.
So I'd like to know who that actress is, so she can get some love as well, because if she's going to be a bigger part of this season, the armor, which I imagine is going to happen, because not predicting any kind of ending, but what you're talking about, if Din lines up with Bo Katan, that is going to be against what the armorer would want and what Clan Vizsla would probably want. So I imagine that's going to lead conflict here between those 2 factions. And I mean, the last place you want to be is between 2 alpha ladies, man. It's the last place you want to be at. So I do not envy Din in his situation for sure. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all goes down. But yeah, I think it was a good first episode. Set the table for everything. Got us back into the world of Mandalore. I don't know if you want to say anything about it, but we find out what happens with Cara Dune, and they've spoken about it and said she is still alive. She's out there. It's a big universe. They're not writing her completely off. They might recast her. I don't know what they're going to do, but they put her out there for now, and we'll see what happens down the road. For those of you who are a Cara Dune stan, so we will see what happens, and we'll see what happens with Moff Gideon and this new tribunal. Because I mean, Giancarlo was at that premiere. Mercedes Vernado was at that premiere, which I thought was really interesting to me, because I'm like, they've said she's not in the show this season, but her being at the premiere makes me think that she might be. Bill Burr was at the premiere as well. So we may get another Bill Burr episode this season as well. So I just have some questions here about what we're going to get this season. And I like that this was a good way to start off. People wanted more, but look, they just had to lay the table, get you back into the world, and things are coming week to week. So I'm looking forward to that for sure. All right. I think that's it. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for this spoiler review, episode 1 of season 3 of The Mandalorian, The Apostate. We appreciate it madly. Laura, another fun show. Please let people know where they can find you, and any final words that you want to give out about this episode.
No, it feels good to be back in this sort of lived in, comfortable, it feels like coming home with The Mandalorian. So I could not be more thrilled that it's back. And I had a lot of fun today on Twitter, celebrating with fans, celebrating the return of the show, and celebrating that sweet, sweet Rebels tie-in. It just feels good to be head over heels for Star Wars again. So if you want to follow along with me on Twitter, my Instagram handle, it's at @shutup_Laura. And you can find the show that I host with my friend Alice, which is called Force Toast, a Star Wars happy hour, at Force Toast Pod on both Instagram and Twitter.
And are you guesting on any of the shows over the next week or anything that you can promote now, or no?
No, not that I know of, and thank God. This is a lot of Star Wars. This is a lot of Star Warsing to do. So that
It's
I mean,
true.
between Mandalorian and Bad, that's a lot. And
Yeah.
I'm knee deep in the books. I've got Battle Scars is over here.
Oh,
Got that
yeah.
going. So I'm finally in that one. I think I'm on chapter 8. It's going
Oh,
well.
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as for me, you can follow me at the Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The Outlaw Nation on Twitch. When I get on there, I'm starting to find my way back to Twitch now again, even though I thought it was kind of done. But now I'm going to find my way back. So if you haven't followed me there, make sure you do so. I've just picked up a couple of games that I'm going to be have fun playing on there as well. What else? Oh yeah, and then please subscribe to the channel. Really, it's a big thing. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell button. If you're new to us, if you're discovering the Jedi Way for the first time, we are going to be reviewing these every week. So hit that subscribe button, hit that bell button. Trying to get to 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So help me do that here on the Outlaw Nation channel through the Jedi Way as well. All right, y'all take care of yourselves. Be well, and we'll talk to you next time. Oh no, yes, we will talk to you next time. But Laura, what do we have to tell them before we go?
We're going to tell them to remember that your focus determines your reality.